Alright, hi there everyone. It's Connor back again for another jazz improvisation lesson. Before I start, I went back and edited the descriptions of some of the previous videos that have been put up on this page. And one thing I wasn't clear about is that virtually all the information that I'm trying to explain and put out through all these videos isn't original to me. It's original to Barry Harris, who some of you may know is a world-renowned jazz educator and pianist, and he's still alive and he's still an active teacher in New York. And so I don't intend any copyright infringement or anything like that. I'm just taking the information that I've learned from him and trying to make it accessible for the rest of you that are watching this. So thanks, Barry, for all the information, and I'm just trying to put all of it out there. So I attribute everything to him. So hopefully I've made that clear by now. So in this video, I'd like to add on our continuation of working with extra note rules on a dominant seventh scale and kind of exploring how we can combine that with some of the simple things that I talked about in a previous video in order to serve as more fuel for your improvising. So we know from the last set of videos that we can add in sets of chromaticism in order to make chord tones land on the beat. Like for a B flat dominant 7 scale, we can do something like this. Adding in that extra note between tonic and 7, right? One thing to consider in order to become more versatile with extra note rules is to combine them with other small things built on the same scale you're using the extra note rules for. So for instance, in one of the previous videos we talked about practicing small things on a dominant scale like thirds or triads or seventh chords, like so. So what would that look like if we combine that with a half step rule? Well, let's just pick a random third on the B flat dominant 7 scale. Let's say I choose this one. So let's say I wanted to combine that third with a half step rule and still make everything work. I have to know immediately after I come out of that third what half step rule I'm on. So because I came out of it landing on a chord tone, then I would follow the rule for the chord tones with that one half step. Okay? What if I used a different third? What if I did this? Well, that didn't quite work. When I came out of it, I came on a non-chord tone, scale degree 6 if we're talking about B flat 7, so I could use either 0 half steps or 2 half steps. Or alternatively, 2 half steps. Right? What if I wanted to combine a triad and a half step rule? Let's try that. So let's say I do followed the rule for 1 half step. Or I could have done 3 half steps there. Okay? What if I started with a half step rule by itself and then I decided to do a triad or a third or something? So let's say I did something like this. I made everything work. So basically what I'm trying to get to here is when you practice combining extra note rules with other small things on a dominant 7th scale or a major scale or whatever scale you're working with, it can extremely help your versatility switching from one thing to the other, because remember from one of the first videos I talked about, Barry Harris recalls from his time with Coleman Hawkins, he said that Coleman Hawkins reiterated that he didn't play chords, he played movements. And this is an example of this, where you're constantly switching from one thing to the other, but you constantly have control over what you're doing in terms of allowing chord tones to land on strong beats and work with resolutions. So that's just a couple of ideas of how you could go about doing that. Let's talk about extra note rules in terms of a major scale for a second, because we haven't talked about that. We just talked about on a dominant 7th scale. And for a major scale, it's essentially the same thing, except when you have one half step, it occurs in a different spot. So let's take B flat major for a second. If we were to start from the B flat up here and run down here, but if we wanted to do it in the context of a major scale, we would put that half step in between 6 and 5. So in the case of B flat major, it would be that F sharp. So one half step would look like this. Pretty simple. And then everything else from there is the exact same rule. In other words, when you're doing 3 half steps, the first 2 half steps are exactly the same from where they were for the dominant 7. It's between 3 and 2, and 2 and 1. And then that third half step occurs between 6 and 5. So if I started from the third of B flat major, and I wanted to go all the way down to the first scale degree using 3 half steps, it would look like this. Just like so. So that's the only difference between the extra note rules between major and dominant. It's just you incorporate that half step in between 6 and 5. But the important thing to note, and this is something that I didn't mention in the other video, is that that half step could occur anywhere, or it could be occupied by any other combination of notes. And here's what I mean. Let's say I wanted to do B flat major, 1 half step. Right? Who says I can't put that half step or occupy the time of that half step by doing this? So I started with a third, but I still made all the chord tones land on the beat, right? So the extra note doesn't always have to be a half step. It can be any other note or series of notes that occupy the same amount of time that that extra note would allow for. In other words, who says I can't make that extra note down here? Or way down here? Rhythmically, it still lines up, if you kind of get what I'm saying there. What if I use a triplet to occupy the time? Or something like this. See, it's all about making things rhythmically line up to the point where the notes aren't the most important thing by themselves. It's just making sure that we use whatever means necessary or whatever comes out of our creative process in the moment to allow for the chord tones to land on the beat. So that's just a little bit more about extra note rules and how you can work with combining them with other things to help make phrases and to aid your improvisational process. So I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.